500 billion euros. That is the war chest Germany has just unlocked. 500 billion euros. Not spread over decades, not tied up in committee deliberations, not hedged behind constitutional hand-wringing. Available now for one purpose: to rebuild the most powerful conventional army in Europe from the ground up, and the man who made it possible is Vladimir Putin. Every tank Germany orders, every F-35 it receives, every brigade it plants on NATO's eastern flank, every clause of its constitution it rewrites to fund this transformation, all of it traces back to the morning in February 2022 when Russia crossed into Ukraine and woke up a sleeping giant that it had spent years praying would stay asleep. Germany was not supposed to rearm. The post-war settlement that defined Europe for 80 years was built on that single premise: a restrained Germany, a disarmed Germany, a Germany that would never again become the most powerful military force on the continent. That arrangement is over. Putin ended it himself. In this video, we are going to look at exactly how far Germany has fallen from military power and why that decline was so deliberate and so complete, what it took to reverse 80 years of strategic restraint in a single political moment, what Germany is actually building with its half-trillion-euro war chest, and why the hardware it is choosing represents a generational leap in European military capability, and what all of this means for Putin's long-term ambitions beyond Ukraine. Because a rearmed Germany does not just change the balance of power in Europe, it potentially ends Russia's window for further conquest permanently. But first, let's look at where Germany started. Because without understanding how thoroughly it was dismantled, the scale of what is happening now is impossible to appreciate. 1945. Germany surrenders. The Allied powers convene at Potsdam, and the decision is made with the clarity that only total defeat can produce. Germany will be demilitarized. The Wehrmacht is disbanded. Millions of its former soldiers are put to work clearing the rubble of the war they caused. Minesweeping, reconstruction, forced labor across Europe and the Soviet Union. Germany's military hardware is either destroyed or confiscated. The United States assumes control of military decision-making for the country that, just years earlier, had tried to conquer the entire continent. This is where Germany's military story is supposed to end. It does not end there, because the Cold War begins. As the Soviet Union and the Western powers face each other across the Iron Curtain, the calculus shifts. A demilitarized Germany in the middle of Europe is not a safe Germany. It is a vacuum. So, the West authorizes the rebuilding of a German military, the Bundeswehr, integrated tightly into NATO and kept under constant American supervision. At the height of the Cold War, more than 500,000 soldiers serve in the Bundeswehr. It is a formidable force, constrained, supervised, but formidable. And then the Berlin Wall falls. The Soviet Union collapses. The threat that justified rebuilding Germany's military evaporates. And Germany, like almost every other Western nation, begins the long process of drawing down what it built. Slowly at first, then faster, then so thoroughly that by the early years of this century, the Bundeswehr has become something close to a parody of a military force. New recruits train with broom handles because there are not enough rifles to go around. An army that once attempted to conquer the world cannot equip its own soldiers for basic training. The decline does not stop there. In the decade from 2007 to 2017, Germany, the most populous and wealthiest country in Europe, spends just 1.2% of its gross domestic product on defense. At one point in 2018, only 4 of the Bundeswehr's 128 Eurofighter Typhoons are classified as combat-ready. 4 out of 128. The rest sit on the ground, awaiting maintenance that the budget cannot cover, repairs that the personnel cannot perform, spare parts that the procurement system cannot deliver. Land forces are operating at 50% readiness. The Air Force has been gutted, and Germany's senior military leadership is watching this in real time, powerless to reverse it within the political constraints of a country that has made pacifism a point of national identity. Think about what that means. Germany in 2022, the year Russia invades Ukraine, offers to send a few thousand military helmets to help Ukraine defend against an invasion. Not air defense systems, not anti-tank missiles, not artillery. Helmets? The mayor of Kyiv, a former heavyweight boxing champion not known for polite understatement, calls the offer a joke. And he is right. But the joke is not really about the helmets. It is about what the helmets reveal. That Germany, the economic engine of Europe, the country with the largest economy on the continent, has reduced its military contribution to the defense of democracy to a crate of headgear. That is the depth from which Germany is now climbing. Until now, the invasion changes everything, not gradually, not through years of policy debate, immediately. Germany's chancellor at the time announces a €100 billion special fund to rebuild the Bundeswehr, the single largest defense investment announcement in Germany's post-war history, within days of the invasion beginning. Anti-tank weapons flow to Ukraine. Surface-to-air missiles follow. Fuel, ammunition. Germany, the country that had spent decades agonizing over every step it took in any military direction, moves faster than almost any of its neighbors in the opening weeks of the war. But that is only half the story. The chancellor who announces the emergency fund is replaced by Friedrich Merz, who takes the project to a place his predecessor never went. Merz does not just spend more money on defense. He changes the rules that govern how much money can be spent. For years, Germany's constitution has contained a debt brake, a hard limit on how much the government can borrow to fund public expenditures, including defense. It is a mechanism born from Germany's historical relationship with fiscal discipline, and it has functioned for decades as a ceiling on military ambition. Merz persuades the German parliament to amend the constitution itself, carving defense spending out of the debt brake entirely. This is not a budget decision. It is a constitutional revolution. A Washington-based researcher at the Carnegie Institute for Peace frames it correctly. The Russian invasion of Ukraine fundamentally changes the way Germany thinks about defense. The head of the German army agrees, calling it a wake-up call that Germany refused to sleep through this time. And this is not just Russia's doing. The second term of Donald Trump as United States president adds enormous pressure. At the Munich Security Conference in early 2025, the American vice president delivers a speech that lands in European capitals like a grenade. The United States will no longer serve as the automatic guarantor of European security. Europe must defend itself. For Merz, that speech is the final piece of the argument. Germany cannot rely on American protection in perpetuity. Europe must build operational independence from the United States. And Germany, as the continent's largest economy, must lead that process. The debt brake amendment passes. The €500 billion special fund is announced. And Germany sets a target that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. The Bundeswehr will become the strongest conventional army in Europe. Money is easy to announce. What Germany does with it is the real story. And here, Germany's reputation for efficiency and precision engineering applies directly to the problem of military modernization. Start with the Air Force. Germany is retiring its old Tornado jets and replacing them with F-35s, the most advanced fifth-generation multi-role fighters in production. This is not merely an upgrade. It is a generational transformation. The F-35's stealth capability, sensor fusion, and networked warfare systems place Germany in a completely different category of air power. And the F-35 carries a specific capability that matters enormously for European security: nuclear strike certification. Germany's F-35 fleet will give it, and by extension NATO, a more credible and flexible nuclear deterrence posture across the continent than any previous German aircraft has provided. But Germany is not content to buy other nations' technology. It is building the next generation of its own. The Airbus Wingman program is underway. This is an unmanned fighter aircraft, an artificial intelligence-piloted combat drone designed to fly alongside European manned fighters, extending their sensor reach, absorbing risk in place of human pilots, and executing missions ranging from radar jamming to air-to-air combat to precision ground strikes. The wingman is not a support tool. It is a force multiplier. When it enters service in the 1930s, Germany's Air Force will not just be flying the best manned fighters in Europe. It will be flying them alongside autonomous combat aircraft that did not exist when this decade began. Down on the ground, Germany is executing one of the largest arms contracts in its history, the Arminius project, up to 3,000 Boxer battle tanks, a figure that, on its own, would place Germany among the most heavily armored land forces in Europe, are being ordered from Rheinmetall and KMW. The Boxer is built on a modular architecture, meaning it can be rapidly reconfigured for different mission types: infantry transport, command and control, ambulance, direct fire support. It can withstand 14.5mm rounds, improvised explosive devices, and fragmentation threats. Initial deliveries begin in late 2026 and continue through to 2030. Here's where it gets serious. Germany's defense budget for 2026 is 108 billion euros. By 2029, it reaches 152 billion. The United Kingdom's defense budget is projected to reach £74 billion by 2028. France has committed 64 billion euros for 2027. Germany's 2029 figure is larger than both of those combined. Not comparable, not competitive, larger than both combined. And simultaneously, Germany commits 9 billion euros annually to Ukraine through to 2029, financial and military support for an active war, while expanding its own military at a pace that would strain most nations, even without an active foreign commitment. Germany is doing both at the same time, without flinching. Now let's talk about people. Because a military is not just hardware. It is human beings willing to serve, trained to fight, and in sufficient numbers to matter. Germany currently has 182,000 active duty personnel in the Bundeswehr. Russia has well over 1 million. The gap is enormous. Germany has no intention of reaching 1 million soldiers, but it needs to grow, and it is growing. The head of the German army sets targets of 20,000 new soldiers by 2027 and 60,000 within the next decade. A reserve force of 200,000 is planned alongside the active duty expansion, giving Germany close to 400,000 trained military members to draw on in a crisis. The recruitment campaign launched to support these targets is producing results. In February of 2026, 16,100 Germans apply to join the armed forces, a 20% increase on 2025. 5,300 of those applicants formally join, 14% more than the year before. The trajectory is moving in the right direction, and it is moving without conscription, though Germany's military leadership has not ruled conscription out. If voluntary recruitment proves insufficient, Germany is also putting those personnel where they matter most: a permanent military presence on NATO's eastern flank, the 45th Armored Brigade, stationed in Lithuania. Nearly 1,200 troops on the ground now, with plans for up to 5,000 by the end of 2027. Germany's chancellor is direct about what this represents. Not a political gesture, not a symbol of solidarity, but a military contribution to deterrence and actual defense. And alongside the Lithuanian presence, Germany is building barracks near the Belarusian border, capacity for 3,000 soldiers, signaling to Putin that Germany's commitment to the eastern flank is not temporary, not contingent, and not subject to renegotiation. This is what strategic permanence looks like. Not a deployment, a presence, a structure that outlasts any individual government, any single defense budget cycle, any shift in political winds. There are gaps to acknowledge, because Germany's transformation, though extraordinary, is not complete. The deep strike capability problem is real. Germany has a dramatic deficit in long-range precision strike systems. The cruise missiles and ballistic weapons that allow a military force to threaten an adversary's rear areas, logistics networks, and command infrastructure from a safe distance. An order for 400 Tomahawk cruise missiles is in place and represents a meaningful step. But 400 is a starting point, not an arsenal. Germany needs more, significantly more, and it needs the doctrinal framework to use them effectively. Germany also faces the challenge of speed. Military procurement in Germany has historically been a slow, heavily bureaucratic process, and the Bundeswehr Planning and Procurement Acceleration Act is designed to cut through some of that red tape. But legal reform and cultural change are not the same thing. The institutions that made German procurement slow did not become fast overnight simply because a law changed. Accelerating the decision-making culture of Germany's defense establishment is a project that will take years. The wargaming results underscore why speed matters. A recent simulation of a Russian attack on the NATO alliance, using an alleged humanitarian crisis in Kaliningrad as a pretext, followed by a rapid seizure of a Lithuanian city, finds Germany's simulated response characterized by hesitation and fear of escalation. Russia achieves its objectives in the wargame because the response is too slow to matter. In the real world, that outcome would mean a NATO nation occupied before the alliance even reaches consensus on what to do about it. Germany knows this. It is the reason the Eastern Brigade in Lithuania is not just about deterrence through presence. It is about being close enough to respond before the window closes. But here is what matters about Germany's gaps. They are acknowledged, they are named, and they are being addressed. That is fundamentally different from the posture Germany maintained for the previous 2 decades, when the gaps were acknowledged, named, and then quietly accepted as the permanent condition of a country that had decided military power was someone else's problem. That decision has been unmade. Now, let's zoom out, because the story of Germany's rearmament does not end at Germany's borders. It reshapes the entire structure of European security. For 80 years, European security has rested on a triangle: American power, NATO cohesion, and a restrained Germany at the center of the continent. That triangle is shifting. American commitment is no longer unconditional. NATO cohesion has been tested by internal pressures: Hungary's obstruction under Orban, election-driven shifts in political will across member states, the corrosive effect of Russia's years-long disinformation campaign inside European democracies. And Germany, the restrained Germany that was the foundation of the entire arrangement, is restraining itself no longer. What replaces the old triangle is something that Europe has not seen since before the Second World War: a continent taking primary responsibility for its own defense, with Germany leading rather than following. This is not a comfortable transition. Germany's neighbors have spent 80 years being reassured that German military power would never again be unchecked. They are now watching Germany build the largest defense budget in Europe, the strongest conventional army on the continent, and a permanent military presence on the eastern flank that extends Germany's strategic reach further than at any point since 1945. The difference, and it is a critical difference, is the context. Germany is not rearming unilaterally. It is rearming inside NATO, inside the European Union, with explicit political commitments to collective defense that its predecessors never made. The brigade in Lithuania is not there to project German power eastward. It is there to prevent Russian power from moving westward. That distinction matters, and it is the distinction that separates the Germany of 2026 from every version of Germany that Europe spent 80 years fearing. For Putin, this is the outcome he least wanted and most directly caused. Putin's strategic bet in 2022 was partly about Germany. He calculated that Germany's dependence on Russian gas, its pacifist political culture, its constitutional constraints on defense spending, and its historical reluctance to project military power would keep it passive, keep it wringing its hands, keep it offering helmets when missiles were needed. He was betting on the Germany of 2021 to be the Germany of 2026. Instead, Germany rewrites its constitution. It unlocks 500 billion euros. It orders 3,000 Boxer tanks. It buys F-35s. It builds autonomous combat aircraft. It stations brigades in Lithuania. It commits 9 billion euros per year to Ukraine. It does all of this simultaneously. And it does it because Putin invaded Ukraine. Germany was the sleeping giant of European defense. Putin's invasion was the alarm clock. Every tank rolling off the production line for the Bundeswehr is a consequence of Putin's decision. Every F-35 Germany flies is a consequence of Putin's decision. Every German soldier deployed to the Lithuanian border is a consequence of Putin's decision. The half-trillion-euro war chest that will define European security for a generation is a consequence of Putin's decision. Russia built its strategy around a Germany it could manage. The Germany it actually created is the one that will be standing in its way. If you found value in this, subscribe so you do not miss what comes next.